Bye weeks are actually gross, so I'm going to go deep with these wide receiver rankings, really trying to help out. I don't need to talk about the top two tiers. You already know them. You're already starting them. I guess we can start with tier 3. I'm going to be very brief. Yeah, you start Puka. The guy's a stud. Looking at the past month, he's averaging over 10 targets a game. Tough matchup, but who cares? Yeah, you start Mike Evans. You see the 12 targets against the Carolina Panthers. With no Godwin, he's going to have everything in this passing offense. And it's a really good offense with an implied team total about 26.5 points against the Raiders. London, obviously, we are going to start. Well, yes, you did have the implosion for Cousins this past week. And you do actually have the Falcons as pretty big dogs here against the Vikings. I don't know. At the end of the day, you have 16 targets anyway going for Drake London. So the market share numbers are great. Yeah, Cooper Kupp gave you the dud this past week with only 4.5 points. It's because I was playing against Cooper Kupp. Obviously, I was going to shut him down. But regardless, if you look at what you had through the first of 5 weeks of him returning, the man was averaging 10 targets a game. Looking at CeeDee Lamb, this is actually a very good spot for a bounce back where, yeah, you deal with the shoulder injury against the Giants on Thanksgiving. But here you have a perfect matchup going up against the Cincinnati Bengals. We actually do have an implied team total about 22.5 points. And this game has the highest over-under of any game this week, I believe, at 50.5. So you better believe T. Higgins remains a must-start wide receiver every single week. We talked about it last week. Shouldn't have overthought it going up against the Steelers. I'll reiterate, if you remove the first week back from his injury at the very beginning of the season, you've seen that he's had 12, 29, 18, 18, 29, and 17.9 fantasy points. The man's been an absolute crusher, and you have an implied team total of 28 points. Should be the second highest scoring offense in the league this week. Now, let's go over and let's get into tier 4. Maybe we can spend a little more time with these guys. George Pickens, he has 16.5 points this past week, but in a game where Russell Wilson throws the ball for over 400 passing yards, you'd have actually thought that he would have had a better day. It's kind of surprising that this is all you get. But it frankly doesn't matter. You do have a good spot going up against the Cleveland Browns. You have an implied team total closing in on 25 points. And at the same time, this is the first time we have seen all season back-to-back games with 90+% of the snaps for George Pickens. So earlier in the year when Pickens was averaging about 59 to 67% of the snaps, it was very frustrating. And I know a lot of people are pissed with Arthur Smith, but it really has turned the corner since Russell Wilson has taken over. If you remove the snow game, the only games you've had with Russ, Pickens had 22, 11, 20, 16, and 16 fantasy points. I'm going over to Tyreek Hill. I do want to reiterate, this guy is still a must-start option every single week. I know people are frustrated. And yes, Jonnu Smith technically is the number one option in this offense. But nonetheless, you do have the Dolphins projecting out as the top 5 offense in total points scored. It hasn't been like the Jets have just been absolutely locked down against opposing wide receiver 1 so far this season. Garrett Wilson's, it's been ugly, right? I completely understand people looking at the past 3 weeks with Garrett Wilson, where we have not had a single week with double-digit fantasy points and wanting to overreact. And the same people that screamed at me for not having a Garrett Wilson ranking inside the top 5 3 weeks ago are probably going to be screaming at me for still saying that you should start him. But if you're looking at Wilson, nothing has changed. It is a bad offense where absolutely everything is going to be funneled between Wilson and Davante Adams. There are only 3 guys in this offense that touch the ball, with the running back and the 2 receivers. It is so concentrated that while he's been bad, you haven't seen a touchdown over the past 3 weeks. The target volume makes it where you just have to start him regardless. Ladd McConkey is just an absolute stud. Like, to be honest with you, honestly, when you see these rankings come out with the updated format on Friday, Ladd probably will be ahead of Garrett Wilson, right? I mean, you look at a week where Justin Herbert is not able to move the ball down the field, and Ladd McConkey still drops 20 fantasy points. In a game where he doesn't even score a touchdown. The market share numbers are through the roof with Ladd. He looks like he is turning into a straight-up league winner. Now, the only hesitation that I have here with Ladd McConkey and why we are initially ranking him down here at 14 instead of up there inside the top 10 is it is a really tough matchup going up against the Kansas City Chiefs. What we had seen from the Chargers last week, and honestly through the past few weeks, is an implied team total up at 23, 24, 25 points. Well, here it's down at 19.5 to 20 points this week. So yeah, just a really tough spot going up against the Chiefs, who have a 9-day break going into this game. And then looking at Malik Neighbors, it's a very safe spot in a full PPR format where you just know the receptions are going to be there. But again, you don't really have much touchdown upside. We are looking really goofy with our Malik Neighbors a fade call in underdog drafts through the first month of the season. But since then, you have only had one game with 15 or more points for Malik Neighbors. Now, again, I wouldn't be surprised if he is still leading the NFL in targets per game. The volume's through the roof. But the issue is, of course, centered around the offense. You have an implied team total of 17.5 points going up against New Orleans. The volume's safe, but in a non-PPR format, I'd move him down even lower. Now, going over to DK Metcalf, I will say that I probably should not be ranking him this high. DK should probably be behind Jerry Jeudy, but I have DK Metcalf with my own team. I need a big week this week. Please come through, Metcalf, going up against Arizona. I mean, if you look at what we had from a target share perspective, Metcalf actually had 9 targets with only playing 75% of the snaps this past week. Obviously, Metcalf was in and out of the game. It's going to be very important to monitor the practice reports that we have later in the week for Metcalf to make sure that he's at 100%. Good matchup going up against Arizona, but Jerry Jeudy has just been a monster since you had Jameis take over. Jameis's first game starting was against the Baltimore Ravens, and since then, you've had 12, 14, 26, 14, and 40 points for Jerry Jeudy. Now, with that being said, it's a very tough matchup going up against Pittsburgh. I don't want to read too much into what we had against Pittsburgh 2 weeks ago because obviously it was the snow game. If you are looking at Jerry Jeudy over there on Underdog, currently he is sitting higher, lower 65.5 receiving yards. So they are projecting some regression because we have actually had Jerry Jeudy going higher than 65 receiving yards every single week this season with Jameis under center. So, of course, if you wanted to say, Mason, you're an idiot, Judy's a top 10 receiver, you can go take the higher than 65.5 receiving yards on Underdog. I will warn you, it's a very tough matchup going up against Pittsburgh. But you can find that link in the description and comment section. Promo code FLOCK will hook you up with a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, you'll be getting a free Jordan Love pick, more than less than half a total yard for the Thursday night game. And on top of that, a free team review in the live stream that we are doing every single night. Underdog is available in damn near every state. Jackson Smith-Njigba will be our next receiver. This is yet again another week where JSN outscores DK Metcalf. It is the 4th straight week, or actually I want to say this is the 5th straight week where JSN has actually led the Seattle Seahawks in fantasy points scored. However, if you look at the target volume that you've had here with JSN, at least this past week, you do see him fall to 4 targets in a game where Metcalf gets banged up. Metcalf still has 9. You have the super large data set of seasons that we can look at for DK Metcalf. So I will have him still slightly ahead of JSN. I think both are very exciting starts. I think DJ Moore is a very exciting start as well, where if you're looking at DJ Moore, obviously he is absolutely crushed over the past 2 weeks. Now, I will say this is a spot that I'm expecting to see some regression. Like if we look at what we have had in Chicago here, particularly with Caleb Williams, the man has been insane with the amount of passing volume that you've had over the past 2 weeks. Over the past 2 weeks, Caleb Williams has seen 47 and 39 pass attempts. Over the past 2 weeks, Caleb Williams has had 5 passing touchdowns and is averaging about 300 passing yards per game. You have big changes coming in, entirely new coaching staff at this point. I think it's a little bit shaky with the projections that we should have when it comes to the passing volume in this offense. Like where we see Caleb over the past 2 weeks averaging 300 passing yards per game. Right now on Underdog, he is currently higher, lower, 225.5. That is a lot more in line with what we have seen from Caleb all season now. And while, yes, over the past 2 weeks, DJ Moore has been great. If you look at the 5 weeks prior, you had 6, 5, 7, 5, and 13 fantasy points. So I don't want to just overreact and, oh my gosh, I guess DJ Moore is a wide receiver 1 now because of a 2-week stretch. Now, going over to Jaden Reed, very difficult for me to rank Reed right now without knowing the full extent of what we should expect from Romeo Doubs. Obviously, I'll continue to give updates as we get news later in the week. Right now, Jaden Reed is higher, lower, 47.5 receiving yards on Underdog. But again, the thing with Reed is, while the volume isn't there, you've had 1 game with more than 6 targets so far this season. The man continues to just print fantasy points. At this point, he has to be the #1 wide receiver in the NFL in fantasy points per target. It's a matchup going up against Detroit. That's a little bit rare in that the Packers are actually dogs. Most games, you should have the Packers favored where they are able to run the ball in the second half. Probably not going to be the case here. They probably have to throw it with aggression. I'm going over to Davante Adams. I mean, yes, again, I want to reiterate exactly what we said with Garrett Wilson. This is an offense that only allows 3 players to touch the ball. It's Wilson, Adams, and Brees. So even if it's a bad offense, even if these players are worse than you expected them to be coming into the season, they still remain guys that you just probably have to start. You do have the Jets as about 7-point dogs in this matchup as well, so we should have a considerable amount of Rodgers dropbacks. Going over to Devonta Smith, we have not seen a double-digit performance since back in Week 9 against Jacksonville. And if you're looking at the amount of targets he has had since the concussion, you've seen 4, 2, 7, 6, 3, 6. So I have him on my team. Trust me, I'm really hoping that he is better than this. He actually does project to be in the best offense in the league this week with an implied team total about 29.5 points against Carolina. But the issue that you're going to have here is you can probably bank 200 total yards from Saquon Barkley. This is a team that probably is just going to be running the ball consistently in the second half. So I don't know if there's much shootout potential here where you do have the spread in this game of about 14 points. Going over to Marvin Harrison Jr., obviously we had the report going into the Minnesota game where they were telling us that Harrison was going to be the focal point of their offense. And Harrison sets a career high 12 targets and you get 17 fantasy points. But if we go through and look at what we have had from Harrison over the past 6 weeks at this point, you've seen 5, 23, 3, 16, 7, 17. Super inconsistent. If the touchdown is there, he looks okay. If the touchdown's not there, he's absolute buns. The last time we saw him play Seattle, he had 3 receptions for 47 receiving yards. So I'm definitely encouraged from what we had this past week, but I don't want to just go and blow things out of proportion. Now, I can already tell people are going to be screaming at us that we have Jakobi Meyers too low, and I mean, by all means, scream me in the comment section. I'm probably not going to read them anymore because y'all are too mean to me. But anyway, looking at this, you have a horrible offense, and Brock Bowers is the #1 target. Now, of course, you can say, well, Mason, that doesn't matter. Look at over the past 5 weeks. Over the past 5 weeks, this man's averaging almost 10 targets per game. Yeah, that's true. Jakobi Meyers has been great. It's a great matchup. So I guess maybe this is another concentrated offense where you really don't have anybody outside of Meyers and Bowers. But I just really hate the quarterback play here, and I just hate the overall offensive volume. But it is a very good matchup for Jakobi. Brian Thomas, I understand, is lower in our rankings this week than he was last week, despite him coming off a very strong performance with 18 fantasy points. It was the first time we saw him hit 18 points since back in week 7 against the New England Patriots. But also, you have no Trevor Lawrence. So this is a horrendous offense. You have an applied team total about 17.5 points. I mean, you're looking at them as 4.5-point dogs going up against the Tennessee Titans. But again, kind of like Jakobi Meyers, there's nobody left in this offense. You got Brian Thomas and you got the tight end. I'm going over to DeAndre Hopkins. Hopkins actually ties his season high 9 targets against the Raiders. You see him up at 59% of the snaps. But again, with Hopkins, the fundamental issue that you have is he's just not playing enough. And at the same time, if you're looking at the matchup going up against the Los Angeles Chargers, the Chargers have a good defense where we're typically used to seeing actually the Kansas City Chiefs with an implied team total up about 25, 26 points. This week it is down at about 23, so I think you lower expectations just a bit here. Going over to Darnell Mooney. With Mooney, I know he disappoints over the past 2 weeks straight, but you go to the Denver game, the man gets injured, he leaves early. The Los Angeles Chargers game, boo-hoo. Yes, you get a down performance with only 5 points. That's why we are never really ranking Darnell Mooney as just an absolute must-start option regardless of matchup. No, more so, I think Mooney is going to be that boom-bust play where you are kind of reliant on Cousins' passing volume. But we have seen Cousins struggle in a big-time way against any competent defense, and this is more than a competent defense going up against Minnesota. Juwan Jennings will be our next play. With Jennings back-to-back pretty bad performances, but obviously it was a very easy spot to bench him going up against Buffalo with the weather and what sportsbooks were telling us with the implied team total. However, you do have the Niners projecting out to be a better offense this week than they did last, with an implied team total of about 23.5 points. Juwan Jennings has cemented himself as the wide receiver 1 over Deebo Samuel, where he has outscored Deebo Samuel, for what, 4 weeks straight at this point? So, I don't know. I think if you were going to start somebody here, it would be Jennings. Calvin Ridley continues to see more targets than Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, but at the same time, Akine's the guy with all the touchdowns. Calvin Ridley has scored a touchdown in 2 games this season. Now, obviously, we know touchdowns are extremely volatile. It's a lot safer to chase the talent and the volume than the guy who's scoring at the moment. If you're chasing touchdowns, typically you're going to be left holding the bag with nothing at the end of the week. So I would rather start Calvin Ridley if I had to pick somebody. And this is a pretty good matchup going up against Jacksonville. I'm going over to Jameson Williams. This is a receiver that you've seen 7 targets from back-to-back weeks. So actually, this is pretty damn encouraging. This is really the only 3rd and 4th games that we've had from Jameson all season where he's had more than 6 targets. And if we can get this baseline floor where you start Jameson Williams and go, okay, kind of worst case scenario, we're going to get 9-10 fantasy points. And then best case scenario, you get the long receiving touchdown and the 20 points comes in. That'd be a really good spot. Obviously, it's always exciting to go through and to decide to throw somebody in that Thursday night game. Here you do have Jameson Williams, higher, lower, 53.5 total yards on Underdog, which actually is higher than the projections they have with Jaden Reed at the moment. Now, going over to Khalil Shakir, this is a receiver that, yes, over the past 3 weeks has had really nice volume numbers, but you've also had no Keon Coleman and Dalton Kincaid. So when you get these options back in this passing offense, I'm afraid the volume's going to go down for Shakir. So this will be an updated rank that we will have to keep our eyes on. Keenan Allen, back-to-back weeks has been great. You've had 3 touchdowns over the past 2 weeks. You've had 20 fantasy points over the past 2 weeks as well. But again, I want to reiterate what we said with DJ Moore. You have a considerable amount of target competition in this offense. And at the same time, I do think you expect to see some regression with the Caleb Williams passing volume. I'm going to rank Deebo Samuel at 33 because I'm a sucker. I'm an idiot. And for whatever reason, I continue to rank this dude as if he's anything. He's the wide receiver 49 this season in total fantasy points. You've really only had 2 games missed due to injury. Now, yes, you have no McCaffrey. Now, yes, you have no Ayuk. Now, yes, you have no Jordan Mason. So you would assume, oh, okay, I guess they're going to have no other option but to force feed Deebo. Nope, they haven't been doing it. I don't want to hold the snow game against them, but the week prior against Green Bay, I guess, honestly, maybe we're being too hard. Looking at the receivers that you have in San Fran, maybe they should move up just a bit. Where the snow game you can throw out the window. The game against Green Bay with no Brock Purdy you can throw out the window. So really the last 2 games you had with Deebo Samuel, I guess maybe you can blame some pneumonia action too. I don't know. Hopefully Deebo turns the corner, but it's hard to trust him at the moment. I'm going over to Jalen Waddle. I have Waddle in the flock league. Probably not starting this dude. Really good projections for the Jets offense. I think you really only start him if you're desperate for a bye. Same thing, Jordan Addison, Waddle, both you start them, send up a prayer, you get a touchdown. Rome Odunze, send up a prayer, you get a touchdown. But again, if you look at the target volume, a lot of it's been funneled through Keenan Allen and DJ Moore. With Cedric Tillman, I know a lot of people are probably confused. And yes, actually, I did forget him in this video until this point. I should have put him tier 1 alongside Jamar Chase. That is my fault. I'll make sure updated later in the week that Tillman is probably, I don't know, either wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2. We're going to have to flip a coin. Please let me know in the comment section. Do you think Tillman should be right ahead or right behind Jamar Chase? Going over to Amari Cooper. Again, I have no idea. I thought I was ranking this dude as the wide receiver 1 going, oh, okay, yeah. Just give him some time. When he's healthy, he's clearly the wide receiver 1 in this offense. I thought I was doing something there. Clearly, I wasn't. The only thing I was doing was screwing you. As Amari Cooper, you have not seen double-digit fantasy points since back his first week with Buffalo in week 7, which is hilarious, right? Your first week in Buffalo, first week with the team, you only played 35% of the snaps. You dropped 16 fantasy points. And since then, we are looking at 3 games later, you have scored a whopping 12. The man's been a bum. I wouldn't start him. I wouldn't start Adam Thielen either. I know a lot of people are going to be suckered into the play that we've had with Bryce Young over the past 2 weeks. And while, yes, Bryce Young's looked good over the past 2 weeks against the Chiefs and the Bucs, at the same time, you do have the Carolina Panthers projected to be the lowest scoring offense in the NFL this week, according to sportsbooks. We have a sample size of 20 games with Bryce Young of him looking like the worst or a bottom 3 quarterback in the NFL. You cannot ignore all of that because he played 2 good football games. I think sportsbooks know what they're doing. They're telling us it's a garbage offense. The targets are dispersed among a bunch of these players. Don't start Adam Thielen. Don't start Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. I know it's great. This is a receiver that has just been printing touchdowns. You go through since DeAndre Hopkins was sent bye-bye, or let's just go since the bye. You have a touchdown off of 2 targets. You have a touchdown off of 4 targets. A touchdown off of 4 targets. A touchdown off of 6 targets. No touchdowns off of 3 targets. But then a touchdown off of 6 targets. A touchdown off of 5 targets. 2 touchdowns off of 8 targets. So yes, if you've been putting anytime touchdown parlays for Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, I mean, you've been printing money. But again, touchdowns are extremely difficult to predict going into the future. What you want to chase is volume in good offenses. Nick Westbrook-Ikhine is not in a good offense, and he does not have volume. MVS is also a touchdown scoring machine. You look at over the past 3 weeks, 2 touchdowns off of 3 targets, a touchdown off of 4 targets, a touchdown off of 3 targets. However, do you have volume or are you in a good offense? Nope and nope. Do not start this dude. And Elijah Moore obviously was pretty damn good this past week. But again, I would not start him based on the fact that you probably see some overall passing volume regression for Jameis in this offense. While at the same time, Cedric Tillman coming back in should lower the market share numbers just a bit for Elijah Moore. But I think that's all I got for you. Really hope I was able to help you out. Again, if you wanted to go through and say, Mason, you're an idiot. Jerry Jeudy has had more than 65 receiving yards every single game this season with Jameis Winston. Y'all want to take the higher? You can do so over there on Underdog Fantasy. You can find that link in the description, in the comment section. Promo code FLOCK will give you a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, at the same time, you're going to be getting a free Jordan Love pick, more than less than half a total yard for the Thursday night game. And on top of that, you'll be getting a free team review in the live stream that we're doing every night. But I think that's all I got for you. Really appreciate you and really hope we get to see you out with the live stream tonight.